celebrated. After 4 years of bitter war, an armistice was signed. The war to end all wars was over. November 11, 1919 was set aside as Armistice Day in the United States to remember the sacrifices that men and women made during World War I in order to ensure a lasting peace. On Armistice Day, soldiers who survived the war marched in a parade through their hometowns. Politicians and veteran officers gave speeches and held ceremonies of thanks for the peace they had won. Congress voted Armistice Day a federal holiday in 1938, 20 years after the war ended. But Americans realized that the previous war would not be the last one. World War II began the following year, and nations great and small again participated in a bloody struggle. After the Second World War, Armistice Day continued to be observed on November 11th. In 1953, townspeople in Emporia, Kansas called the holiday Veterans Day in gratitude to the veterans in their town. Soon after, Congress passed a bill introduced by Kansas Congressman renaming the federal holiday Veterans Day. In 1971, President Nixon declared the federal holiday on the second Monday in November. Veterans Day honors all American veterans, both living and dead. It is intended to thank veterans for dedicated and loyal service to their country. November 11th of each year is the day that we ensure veterans know we deeply appreciate the sacrifices they have made in their lives to keep our country free.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished veterans, presenting the University of Illinois Detachment 190 Drill Team. Present. Park. Order. Park. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoy this performance by the University of Illinois Detachment 190 Drill Team. Distinguished veterans, thank you for your service. Order. Hard.
Junior Sarah Edgar, who will be reading a presentation of a poem.
call, defending the freedom and safety of all. On land or on sea, or in jets high above, they went out of duty, of honor, in love. But however they served, Lord, wherever they went, please bless them and help them to know what it meant, and help us to thank them on Veterans Day, for we owe them far much more than we could ever say.
Matthew Creed.
Thank you very much. And thank you, distinguished veterans, for your service. There are quite a many stories in this room, I can imagine. This is a great occasion for a number of reasons for our veterans, for their service, as we reflect on our great nation and what it costs for us to have such a great nation. It's also a particular honor for me to be up here as my wife is a Gibson grad. I did have kind of the question coming in here today. We still call this GCMS, but is there not other towns involved in this district, like Foosland, and what other towns are represented at GCMS? How long could we make that acronym, I suppose? I'm thinking maybe we should have a game of Scrabble and come up with a name, right? At any rate, it is a great honor, and I thank you all for this privilege to be here with you, particularly among distinguished veterans. Thank you again. What a wonderful day it is for Veterans Day to take pause to reflect on how we got here and where we are going. And hopefully at the end of my talk, you might have an idea as to where we are going and how we might get there. I got the great privilege of serving and living in a very strange place called Arlington National Cemetery. I say it's a strange place to live in a cemetery, you can imagine. I always said that it was great to live in Arlington. I loved my neighbors because they were very quiet. Arlington is remarkable in so many ways. I could talk for hours as to why Arlington is so amazing. It has an incredible history. I'd love to tell you all about it, but I'll leave it to your history teachers. You might be bored. But it actually has a very, very rich history. It began by George Washington's adopted grandson some 150 years ago. At the breakout of the Civil War, it began as a cemetery. And it's continued as a cemetery to this day. In fact, it is an active cemetery. To this day, there's some nearly 350,000 American heroes buried in Arlington. 350,000. I think I need to update my slide. Because it is growing by an average of 25 to 30 new veterans every day, Monday through Friday. Can you imagine 25 to 30 funerals every day, to the point where, because the days aren't long enough, they have to come in on Saturday for another 10 to 12 funerals. That humbles me to imagine. I don't have to imagine because I've seen it. How many here have seen Arlington National Cemetery? You could probably vouch for how humbling it is to walk among those gravestones. The endless sea of rolling headstones seems to never end. I guess it never does end, as it continues to grow every single day. If that doesn't strike you enough, imagine this, that Arlington, even at 350,000, that's roughly 100 times the size of Gibson City. So take all of Gibson City, cram them into 624 acres, and that is the size of Arlington National Cemetery. And each one of those stones represents an American who gave a large part of their life, if not gave their entire life, for our country, for each one of you sitting here today. It is so remarkable, so humbling to be in such a place. And that is what today represents. So consider today with similar reverence. If that's not remarkable enough for you, imagine that Arlington, as big and busy as it is only one of among 101 national cemeteries, and it's not the biggest or the busiest. It is overwhelming to consider the price that our country comes at. I wish I could go on and on about some of the heroes buried in Arlington, as well as some of the heroes sitting amongst us. But I'm also here to talk about one of the distinguished graves in Arlington. There are many. I don't mean to diminish the importance of any one of them, but I worked at a particular grave called the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which is kind of deceiving because it's actually the grave of 4 individuals. There are actually representatives from World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam. But let it not be misinterpreted that this is not the grave of 4 individuals, but these individuals are representatives. They are a symbol. They are one delegate among many to represent the true price, the tremendous, overwhelming price of American freedom. So the tomb itself, albeit beautiful and amazing and remarkable in so many ways, is a symbol of a far greater thing. A far greater thing. And that is why that we can't guard every grave, but we guard this one. Myself, as a guard, we would walk back and forth 21 steps at a time and pause for precisely 21 seconds at a time, all alluding to the number 21, which is the highest number of salute in the military. So, in essence, everything we do as a guard, every pass we make, 21 steps, is an offering of the highest honor, the highest respect, the highest regard that we can give the United States military to those who lay beneath our feet. But it's not just to those 4 unknowns, it's to all of those who have fought, died, and served. It is a proverbial salute. The guard walks back and forth, not just in his steps, but everything about the guard is a proverbial salute to the unknowns. Not just when we pause to salute, but every move we make, every step we take, every element of our uniform, every part of our persona, even the soldier beneath the uniform, every facet of the being of that soldier is intended to be the highest salute to the highest sacrifice. Every part of us is geared around that. So remember that the tomb represents the highest price that it costs for our freedom we enjoy today. That's what the tomb represents. And the tomb guard represents America's commitment to never forget of those sacrifices and what it took for us to get here today. And that is what we pause for Veterans Day to remember. Why? How we got here. And why we endure. There are innumerable things I can tell you about the tomb. I can talk all day about it. But the most important piece is why we take 21 steps. Why we go to such great care in taking care of our uniform. Why we expect the highest standards of our guards. Our guards are not just good at walking 21 steps at a time or putting together a fine uniform. They're also expected to be very intelligent. In fact, we have to memorize, part of our training, 18 pages of information about the tomb and Arlington National Cemetery and about a number, some 300 individuals that are buried in Arlington. We have to memorize it verbatim, every single word in perfect order and sequence, both orally and verbally, tested periodically. So we're tested in both ceremonies and this 18 pages of what we call knowledge. Again, verbatim to perfection, no errors. We have to be able to recite or write it at any given point, verbatim, and with no more than 2 errors. Any more than 2 errors in those 18 pages is considered a failure. So we're tested periodically amongst our knowledge, our ceremonies, our uniform, periodically throughout our training, which takes anywhere from 6 months to a year, depends on how well the individual is doing. We're tested on that. If we are given more than 2 errors in each category, if we get a 3rd error, that's considered failure. And we are required to retest. If we fail to retest, again, with any one of the categories with more than 3 errors, then that is a double failure and considered to be a total failure. And we wash out. That is a military way of saying that you either are kicked out and given your next assignment in the United States Army, or you can be recycled all the way back to the beginning. So if you for anybody, any grade here, consider a high school senior. Where are the seniors at in this crowd? Over here, mostly, right? Okay, seniors over here. So imagine getting to your senior year, you've done great, and then you fail your final exam. And they tell you, if you want a high school diploma, you can go all the way back to kindergarten and start over again. What would you do? Say, I'm good with GED. Or would you go back to kindergarten? I think they made a movie about that, wasn't it? Was it the Adam Sandler movie? I'll try not to reference anything he said in that. It'd be dishonorable. But if one of our soldiers, one of our tomb guards in training surpasses, makes it all the way through these tests, they are invited to stay permanently, semi-permanently, for a couple of years to serve the tomb. And we're also awarded a distinguished badge. This badge here on my right side, it's called the Tomb Guard Identification Badge. It is the 2nd rarest award ever given in the United States military. I'm the 510th recipient in American history. And that is because there's so few, because even though that we are all volunteer, no one is forced to guard the tomb. We're all volunteer. 90% of volunteers quit in training. And why would they quit? Because it's hard. Anybody here ever played a sport? Come on, all of you have played a sport, right? Even if you were no good at it, you didn't like it, you played a sport one time in your life. In high school, I only played one sport, that was football. Why? Because I was clumsy, no good basketball player. I bounced the ball off my foot every time. They called me the quintessential clumsy white dude. At any rate, I played football, and that's all I wanted to do. But to be exempt for PE in 2nd semester, you had to take another sport. So I went out for track just to throw the shot put a couple times to get out of PE. Well, every once in a while, they'd make me run the 400 or the 800 meter run. And I don't know why, but I suspected that they made me do that because no one else wanted to. Because it's an awful race, either one of them. It's hard. Some of the sports you played was hard. But why did you do it? Some would say it was fun. Some would say that it's valuable to be a part of a team. You could go on about all kinds of number of reasons. But ultimately, you kept going. You kept running the race. When I ran the 400 meter, I was always last. But yet I kept going. I finished the race, even in dead last. Thankfully, I didn't care much about where to finish in that. But I did care about how I finished as a tomb guard. And an important element that I have to admit, I've never actually told this in public before, but I failed more than half of my tests the first time. In fact, when it came to my final exam, what we call the badge test, I failed it. And so then the pressure was on. I had a retake. I retrained for a couple of weeks, and they allowed me to retake it. And you remember, if I had more than 2 mistakes in any one of my 3 categories, then it was over for me. And I failed, honestly, because I wasn't the best. I just wasn't. Consider if I was on the drill team, I don't know about any of you, but I had to drop that rifle about 4 or 5 times. I I will state that I never dropped my rifle at 2, because that's an automatic boot back to kindergarten or to Korea, whichever the boss in charge feels like you ought to preserve. At any rate, my point is this, that I failed. But I went on and finished the race. And there's something that continued to remind me, something that pushed me through, even though the odds were against me. Because out of all those that began, 80 to 90% of those volunteers who wanted to be there never saw it through to finish the race and to earn what's called the two-card identification badge. They don't have their name in the National Archives. They're just an empty space. But I finished the race, as many of our veterans did. One question that comes up in reference to this, and it will all bring us all together, and you'll understand here very soon what I'm getting at, is why do we stand in miserable conditions such as the rain and the snow? That the picture, the rainy picture to the, I guess it's to your left. Supposedly that's a picture of the hurricane a couple years ago. That's actually just a normal rainy day in Washington. But we do walk through hurricanes in all different conditions. The heat, the cold, no matter what's going on, including the flu. We don't get sick days because there's not enough of us to continue the duty. So even when I had the flu, I'd have to swallow my vomit back down. I can tell you many uncomfortable stories, including one of my colleagues having diarrhea in the middle of his shift. And I happened to be the one to go out and mop up the stains off of the Grand Plaza. But we guard in all different conditions, all different circumstances, including September 11, 2001, when the plane literally flew just hundreds of feet over top of the tomb to hit the Pentagon. We never interrupted our duty. In all circumstances, we continue to the highest of standards beyond what's even reasonable. Why is it reasonable for a person to memorize 18 pages of information? That's not reasonable. But we expect, again, the highest honor, the highest respect for the highest sacrifice given. You see the correlation? We go to extremes, beyond extremes even, because our heroes, including some sitting here in the middle of the room, went to extremes in their duty. We walk back and forth in all conditions because our heroes, they maintain their composure in all circumstances. To leave you with an interesting image, when I say all conditions, I mean all circumstances. In fact, one of the most people ask what is one of the most difficult circumstances I challenged that I faced, and I can think of a number of different things, but the first thing that comes to mind is the bugs. Because we maintain our composure regardless of what's going on. If you got an itch, or the sweat is dripping through your eyebrow, you ever had sweat in your eye, burns a little bit, and you want to rub that out? We don't rub our sweat off our brow. That would be breaking composure. But what about a bug on your face? Or a bee stinging? What do you do when a bug crawls on your skin? Swat that thing off. My children see a spider 12 feet away, they scream and run the other direction. The tomb guards don't break composure in any circumstance, right? So the worst of the worst was when we had this scientific phenomenon, a biological phenomenon of sorts, called the Great Cicada Brood, 2003. Everybody seen a cicada? We do bug collections in second grade at Fisher. Anybody ever do a bug collection in Gibson City? Did you do that here? Okay. Do you remember in your bug collection the locust or the cicada? Well, we had a cicada variety that emerges every 17 years in the Washington area. Every 17 years, and they come out of the ground in epic proportions. Like, this must be the same variety that was in Egypt at the biblical account that just ate everything. These things come out by the bazillions. There is no number to account for number of these bugs. We swept up piles of these things every day, literally 5-gallon buckets full of work every day from around the tomb. And I remember seeing one of my colleagues with one of those giant cicadas crawl on the side of his face. But he didn't break composure. And why do you think that he didn't break composure? Think about it for a moment. What am I getting at on Veterans Day? He didn't break composure. I'm not sure if I could handle it. He didn't break composure because our heroes didn't break their composure in the worst of the worst conditions. Think about it in World War I, trench warfare. Went on and on and on in miserable conditions, malnourished in whatever circumstance. World War II, Battle of the Bulge. We think of units that weren't equipped for this one of the worst winters ever recorded in Germany. Malnourished, under-equipped, freezing, and a push where some units were isolated, completely surrounded, and yet they held their composure. POWs in all different wars, but you think of Vietnam, where, well, in all wars, there are POWs involved where they're tortured in many different ways. And yet, our heroes held their composure. And so that is why the Tomb Guard holds his composure. So if you remember one thing from today, I will tell you this. The reason why our country has prevailed and become what it is because our heroes, our veterans, held their composure in the hardest of circumstances. And the Tomb Guards, the ones that stand out there and earn this badge, I can tell you right now that it wasn't the best of the best, because I was the guy who would have dropped a rifle and bounced the basketball off his foot. I was a failure. But I'll tell you the secret. It's beyond composure. It's what I call perseverance. That is what leads to success in America and in the world today, is perseverance. For you little ones that might not know that word very well, what does perseverance mean? There's some hands held up high. I can't hear you way up there. But I'll tell you in short, perseverance is following through, never quitting. In the 400-meter race, that whole lap around the track, when it really starts to hurt on the backside of the track, it's finishing the race. It's finishing, following through on your commitments. You got the big test coming up, and it's getting late, and you're cramming because you didn't study well enough before. It's staying up late to make sure that you're prepared for that test. That's persevering. When things get difficult, you follow through. That's perseverance. These heroes sitting in the middle, we honor them once a day, every year, because they persevered. We are grateful for their sacrifice because they persevered. The Tomb Guards stand in all conditions. We persevere in all circumstances, including cicadas on the face, as a symbol of perseverance, as a token of gratitude, to ensure that our country never forgets the sacrifice of our veterans. It's perseverance. I'll end with this. Inappropriate as it may be in a public school, they can reprimand me later. I'll take it. One of the things after I failed, I'm failed at many things in life, including as I fight a terrible disease called brain cancer today, which I'm now, it appears, failing in many ways. But I persevered, because it's what I've learned is the only way to survive in life, quite literally, in my circumstance now. And I learned it from this. This is what kept me through the Army. This is what helped me finish the race as a Tomb Guard. And in theory, will help me finish the race regardless of circumstances of my cancer today. And as you think about this, as you face incredible challenges in your life to come, try to remember this Veterans Day. Remember why our heroes are honored, because they persevered. Why is the Tomb Guard stand in the rain and the snow? We persevere because of their heritage that we now extend to you, the next generation. So let me end with this. So now, Since we have been made right in God's sight by faith in his promises, we can have real peace with him because of what Jesus Christ our Lord has done for us. For because of our faith, he has brought us into this place of highest privilege where we now stand. And we confidently and joyfully look forward to actually becoming all that God has in mind for us to be. You could also interchange that and think of the country that we stand in, this privilege that we have. We've been made right. It is a gift given to us to be an American. It is a privilege, it's not a right that you have to be here. Continuing on, with all this in mind, we can rejoice, even in our challenges, problems, and trials, for we know that they're actually good for us. They help us to learn to persevere. And perseverance develops strength of character. And character builds hope, so that we can trust God more and more until finally our hope and faith are strong and steady. Then when difficulties come, we're able to hold our heads high, no matter what happens, and know that all is well. For we know how dearly God loves us, and we feel this warm love everywhere within us because God has given us his Holy Spirit to fill our hearts with his love. That's Romans chapter 5, verses 1 through 5. I clung to that and I cling to it today. Perseverance builds character, which ultimately brings real hope. That's the only hope that I have left. And that's a hope. No pun intended, I didn't think about it. That's the hope that I hope all of you will find. Persevere to build character, which will ultimately lead to hope. So as you leave here today, thank a veteran and persevere.
The GCMS 8th grade class has a present for you to present to you for your service, for you and your family.
On behalf of the 8th grade class, we'd like to present you and your family this gift as thanks for the service you have provided our country.
Thank you all. We'll sing the Army Air Corps.
The Air Force is the youngest military service. Initially part of the United States Army, the USAF was formed as a separate branch of the military in September 1947 under the National Security Act of 1947. The primary mission of the Air Force is to defend the United States and its interests through exploitation of air and space. To accomplish this mission, the Air Force operated fighter aircraft, tanker aircraft, light and heavy bomber aircraft, transport aircraft, and helicopters, which are used mainly for rescue down there during special operations missions. Currently, there are just over 65,000 commissioned officers on active duty in the Air Force and about 260,000 enlisted members. At this time, we'd like to ask any current or former members of the Air Force to please stand to be recognized.
The United States Army is the main ground force of the United States. The Army's main function is to protect and defend the United States and its interests by way of ground troops, armor, artillery, attack helicopters, tactical nuclear weapons, and more. The Army is the oldest U.S. military service, officially established by the Continental Congress on June 14, 1775. The Army is also the largest U.S. military service. There are approximately 80,000 officers and 430,000 enlisted members in the active duty Army. At this time, I'd like to ask any current or former members of the Army to please stand and be recognized.
Marines are often referred to as the infantry of the Navy. Marines specialize in amphibious operations, In other words, their primary specialty is to assault, capture, and control beachheads, which then provide riders to attack the enemy from almost any direction. Marines were officially established in 1775 by the Continental Congress to act as a landing force of the United States Navy. In 1798, however, Congress established the Marine Corps as a separate service. While amphibious operations are their primary specialty, in recent years, Marines have expanded into other ground combat operations as well. With the exception of the Coast Guard, the Marines are the smallest service. There are approximately 22,000 officers and 180,000 enlisted personnel on active duty in the Marines. At this time, we'd like to ask any current or former members of the Marine, please stand and be recognized.
Like the Army, the Navy was officially established by the Continental Congress in 1775. The Navy's primary mission is to maintain the freedom of the seas. The Navy makes it possible for the United States to use the seas where and when our national interests require it. In addition, in times of conflict, the Navy helps supplement Air Force air power. Navy aircraft carriers can often deploy to areas where fixed runways are impossible. The Navy is also primarily responsible for transporting troops to areas of conflict. The active duty Navy has about 54,000 officers and 270,000 enlisted personnel. At this time, we'd like to ask any current or former members of the Navy to please stand and be recognized.
The United States Coast Guard was originally established as a revenue cutter service in 1790. In 1950, it was reformed as the United States Coast Guard under the Treasury Department. Legislation passed in 2002 transferred the Coast Guard to the Department of Homeland Security. In peacetime, the Coast Guard is primarily concerned with law enforcement, boating safety, sea rescue, and illegal immigration control. However, the President of the United States can transfer part or all of the Coast Guard to the Department of the Navy in times of conflict. The Coast Guard consists of ships, boats, aircraft, and shore stations that conduct a variety of missions. The Coast Guard is the smallest military service with about 40,000 personnel on active duty. At this time, we'd like to ask any current or former members of the Coast Guard to please stand and be recognized.
What can you say to On behalf of the entire GCMS school district, I would like to thank all veterans of the United States military for their service to our country. Your sacrifices and commitment to our freedom have helped make this country great and will never be forgotten. For the veterans in attendance, thank you for sharing this celebration with us and making this day truly special. Would you now please stand as the GCMS High School band plays God Bless America.